respectable Dean Languages, Professor Jindal sir, Head of the Open and Distance Learning Department, Professor Satnam Sandhuji, the resource persons for various technical sessions to be held today, Professor Rajesh Kumar Sharma, Professor Lalan Bagheri, Professor Rajesh Jaiswal from Punjab University, Chandigarh, my teachers, Professor Suraj Raj, Professor Rajinder Lail. First and foremost, at the outset, I express my gratitude to the Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Arvind, and Professor Satnam Singh Sandhu, Head, Department of Open and Distance Learning, for granting prompt permission to organize this workshop. The idea of the workshop can be traced back to a collective desire to probe the phenomena of academic and research writing, both at practical and theoretical levels. There was a feeling that it is very important for students, research scholars, and faculty members to have a clear idea about how to negotiate language when they make it an instrument of research and academics. We are fortunate that some of the most illustrious and renowned academicians and scholars have agreed to be part of this workshop as resource persons. The workshop will be spread over 2 days, and apart from the inaugural and valedictory sessions, we'll be having 4 technical sessions. In these sessions, we'll be dealing with a wide range of issues linked with writing and academics. There will be lectures on goal of academic and research writing, the evolution of research methodologies, and many technical aspects related to the process of writing. It gives me immense pleasure to share with you that we received a very good response to the workshop, because initially more than 50 participants registered on the very first day, and because we are short of space, so we immediately closed the registration process. Today we have amongst us research scholars from various departments in our university, from Central University, Bathinda, from Punjabi University campus, Talwandi Sabo. We have several faculty members also who have registered as participants for this workshop from various departments in the university. I sincerely hope that this workshop and all the technical sessions will be intellectually stimulating and useful for all of us. And once again, I welcome all the resource persons and participants. I would now request Head of the Open and Distance Learning Department, Professor Satnam Singh Sandhuji, to please formally welcome the resource persons for today's technical sessions.
प्यारे दोस्तों, जिवें कि तुहानूं डॉक्टर साहब ने एलैबोरेट किया है कि असीं 2 दिन की वर्कशॉप कर रहे हैं। मैं फॉर्मली तुहाडा सारिਆਂ ਦਾ स्वागत करदा हां। ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਆਈਡੀਆ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਕਰਵਾਉਣੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਡੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਅੱਜ ਤੋਂ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ 30 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ PhD ਕਰੀ ਸੀ, ਉਸ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਜਰ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਆਏ ਨੇ। मैथडोलॉजी मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट हो गई है, कंपलैक्स हो गई है। आइडिया आइडियालॉजी तो मैथडोलॉजी तक ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਲੇਅਰਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਸਟਿੰਕਟ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਆਨਲਾਈਨ ਰਿਸੋਰਸਸ ਦੇ ਆਉਣ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਥਡੋਲॉजी ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੇ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਕਾਲਰ ਹੈ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰ ਉਹ ਰਾਈਟਿੰਗ ਸਮੇਂ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕੱਟ ਪੇਸਟ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਡਿਸਕੋਰਸ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਨਰੇਟ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੇ ਚੈਲੰਜ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚੈਲੰਜਸ ਨੂੰ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਲੈਬੋਰੇਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ, ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ, ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੁਡੋ ਆਈਡੀਆਜ਼ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਡੋਮੀਨੇਟ ਕਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਰਾਈਟਿੰਗਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਰਾਈਟਿੰਗਸ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਡਿਸਕੋਰਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਾਸੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ। ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰੀ ਇਹ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸੋਰਸ ਡੋਮੀਨੇਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਤੇ ਸੋਰਸਸ ਦੀ ਬੈਕਗ੍ਰਾਉਂਡ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮੈਟਿਕ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇੱਕ ਸਮਾਂ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟਲਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਈਡੀਆਜ਼ ਇੱਕ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੇ ਸਟੋਰ ਕੀਤੇ, ਅਲੱਗ-ਅਲੱਗ ਕੰਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟ ਬਣਾਏ, ਔਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੈਗਰੀਗੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਆਈਡੀਆਜ਼ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਏ, ਤੇ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਵਰਕ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਜਨਰੇਟ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। ਪਰ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਵਿਦ ਦਾ ਪੈਸੇਜ ਆਫ ਟਾਈਮ ਨਿਊ ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਨਵੇਂ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਆਈਡੀਆਜ਼ ਜਨਰੇਟ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੌਪ ਅਪ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰਨਾ। ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਇਹ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਨਵੀਂ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਆਟੋ ਮੋਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦੋਂ ਗੂਗਲ ਦਾ ਸਪਾਈਡਰ ਸਰਚ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੋਰਸ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਲੈਣੇ ਆ, ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰ ਇਹ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਇਹ ਬੁੱਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਣ ਦੀ ਬਜਾਏ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਈਜ਼ੀ ਮੀਡੀਅਮ ਹੈ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਰਿਸੋਰਸ ਮਿਲ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਪਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦਿੱਕਤ ਇਹ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਕਾਲਰ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਿਸਟਿੰਕਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਜਿਸ ਲਾਈਨ ਤੇ ਜਿਸ ਐਪਿਸਟੀਮੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ ਆਸਪੈਕਟ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਚੱਲਿਆ ਹੈ, ਕੀ ਉਸ ਦਾ ਆਈਡੀਆ ਜਾਂ ਡਿਸਕੋਰਸ ਉਸੇ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਮੀਦ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਸਵਾਲ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਰ ਰਿਸਰਚਰ ਲਈ, ਜਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪੇਪਰ ਲਿਖਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਕਤ ਇਹ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਦਾ ਬੇਸਿਕ ਕਨਸੈਪਟ ਹੈ, ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਟੀਚਰ ਵੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਿਫਿਕਲਟੀ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੇਪਰ ਪਬਲਿਸ਼ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੈਲੰਜਸ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਮੈਥਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੇ, ਕੰਕਲੂਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਅੱਛੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਆਈਡੀਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਫਲੋਰਿਸ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਠੀਕ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਸੈਸ਼ਨ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਇਹ ਡੈਲੀਬਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਊਗਾ। ਉਮੀਦ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਰੂਟਫੁਲ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੂਗੀ, ਸਾਰੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੇਟ ਕਰੋਗੇ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਫਾਰਮਲੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਇਸ ਡਿਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਆਪਣੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲੀਗਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਕਰਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ, ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿਣਾ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮਚ।
Thank you, sir. In the first technical session, as already shared with you, we have Professor Rajesh Kumar Sharma from the Department of English, Punjabi University, Patiala. An exhaustive introduction to the speaker would, I think, take hours, and his achievements would, academic achievements and accomplishments would take a long time to be discussed here. I asked sir for a bio note and he sent me 2 small paragraphs, and I am reading those out for you. Our first speaker today, resource person for the first technical session, Dr. Rajesh Kumar Sharma, is a professor in the Department of English, Punjabi University, Patiala. An essayist, critic, and translator, Rajesh Sharma has published 7 books, the latest being Pash and Dil, Critical Essays and Poems in Translation. His work has also appeared in Brevity, Film Philosophy, Tangentium, World Literature Today, Chandrabhag, Biblio, the Book Review, Economic and Political Weekly, Mainstream, and The Wire, in addition to various reputed academic journals and newspapers. He has edited South Asian Ensemble, a Canadian-Indian quarterly of literature and arts, for several years. Sir, we are indeed privileged to have you in the inaugural session as the keynote speaker in this workshop. I would request the head Department of Open and Distance Learning to formally welcome the resource person and present him a bouquet. I would also request Dean Languages, sir,
Yeah, I don't deserve this. I thought I would and they were seniors also. You don't know, I used to come to learn from them when I was a senior. So take this formality away, please.
Thank you. May I take a minute to welcome a very special guest, a teacher who has taught generations, Professor Kumkum Bajaj, former head. Let me share with you, Madam has been a teacher to almost all of us. If she has not taught us in the classes, she has instructed us, she has guided us outside the classes. So, and just a couple of days back, I called her. She was in New Zealand, and I was really, her enthusiasm is incredible. She immediately gave her commitment. She said, I will be part of your workshop, and but you must schedule my lecture in the last. Yesterday, when I sent her a message again with the schedule of the program, she said, don't worry, I will be there throughout the 2 days and I will listen to all the technical sessions. We welcome you, madam. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. With this, may I invite Professor Rajesh Kumar Sharma, the resource person, for the keynote address. Thank you.
My dear colleagues from this and Punjab University and other universities, friends, students, and scholars. Academic writing is part of the language of knowledge. That, I think, sufficiently explains why it should matter. The production of knowledge, the transmission of knowledge, these happen in a certain kind of language, and that is what we indicate by the word. Now, there are some essential questions which we need to recap or think if we have not already thought of them. The first is, what is the state of affairs within which we are today gathered to discuss the nature, function, and future of academic writing? The second is, what is the purpose of academic writing? Because academic writing does not indicate only what we do with any language in any register, in any form. It's a specific formation within that. Then, what is to be done if the purpose is not being met or not being met adequately? And we all know that, considering the status of academic writing today, a lot needs to be done. Now, this question cannot be answered if we don't try and understand the question of what is meant by language as such. Because academic writing is part of language. Since it is part of language, we have to grapple with the more essential question of what is language. Then this leads us to the next question, for which I believe the workshop has been organized. What is to be done with academic writing? And then I will try and give you a certain brief outline of the guideposts that those who are engaged with academic writing, we as students or as researchers, what essential things that we have to keep in mind. The rest, I'm sure the resource person will be elaborating in their sessions. So, coming to the state of affairs, whatever I have gathered in the course of the several years that I have been into academia, unfortunately, although we believe that we are living in a world of reason and light, there are more myths here than anywhere else. Since we are dealing with academic writing, obviously we have to consider which myths about academic writing dog us. One of those is that academic writing automatically will happen if we are studying research books, we are studying, say, uh, the primary text and the secondary text, and we pick up the kind of language that is required. This is a myth. Learning of the kind that research demands only happens when we learn consciously, taking conscious decisions. Two, there is this myth that academic writing needs to impress someone. And the result is that the writer becomes a performer. You see, the domain of research, of scholarly exchange is not a circus. Where the cleverer you are, the better you will be respected. The simpler you are, the more essential your engagements are, the farther you go, the clearer you are, the more you will be rewarded. I've seen this in fact when I was a young scholar. I would read somebody's research paper and curse myself that I am such a fool that I cannot understand a single sentence. And after years, I discovered that that idiot had not written a decent sentence. He was a big professor, unable to write a decent sentence. So this is one of the myths, in fact, that trouble our young writers. They want to impress somebody somewhere who doesn't really exist, and if he exists, it doesn't matter. Avoid opaque writing. Don't write in ways through which no light passes. Then there is apathy. Apathy is fundamentally a feelingless attitude to language. Language is only a tool, what does it matter? I have seen people coming from other departments, other faculties primarily, other than language. Sometimes they'll say, what does it matter how well you write or not? After all, you're doing a PhD on computer science, on economics, language doesn't matter. Then do it without language. Do it like Kafka did. You have a 3 or 4 hour viva voce and then you get a degree. But can you speak any language for 4 hours sensibly? You can't be able to do that. So you see, this apathy, this has to be broken. And this has actually come to us from our homes and our schools, passing through colleges and universities. Language is something you take for granted. That is the reason you sometimes see educated people talking in the presence of women and men and dropping a Punjabi guard in every phrase. Why? They don't hear themselves speaking. Overcome this. Develop a feel for language. Language, like God in Indian tradition, touches, spashka. That's the reason we say that language makes your skin respond to a word. Then there is this misconceived purpose. That misconceived purpose is that, well, language is only an instrument and research is something else. We are dealing with ideas, we are dealing with data and ideas don't need any language. Maybe then you have attained the status of a prophet, that you can communicate what we see in ancient India, the Sanskrit, the scholars used to call para. The language which is beyond grammar, the language in which the word and the meaning inherent in each other, so that when the word happens, the meaning doesn't have to be disclosed, it is happening simultaneously. I don't believe any of us is actually that kind of issue, that we function at the level of we work in ordinary human language. And then there is this another idea which I was told by my guide at that time, because that was maybe the prevailing opinion, the dominant prevailing opinion, that when you're writing, prefer passive voice, don't say I. Then I discovered, why should I not say I if it's my word? And later, with postmodernism, this actually became an accepted practice that a scholar would say, well, I am black, I am 40, I am homosexual, I live in Brooklyn, this is what it is. At least you make sense of what he understands of reality. Because no research is without the person doing the research. And the sooner the researcher discloses his identity, his bearings, the better it is for the people who read. Now, why does this problem come? Because there is an error believing that all synonyms in a dictionary are actually the same thing. So try and remember that impersonality and objectivity are not the same thing. You can be personal and yet objective. In fact, you cannot be totally impersonal. It is impossible. Objectivity is required because we are personal. And my objectivity is my objectivity, your objectivity is your objectivity. There is a dreamed of objectivity which is beyond the subjects. Now, this is a misconception that I think part of the prevailing state of affairs. And finally, information noise, almost looking like knowledge noise. So much. And sometimes it happens with my scholars also, they'll come like writing the first annual paper and they'll try to put everything they have read and thought into the same paper. Why? Nothing should escape. It is for you to decide what will go in and what will be thrown out. Things have to be thrown. You have to learn this. We are living in a world in which there is so much information that a young researcher is inclined to believe that everything he has found is relevant. If you try to put everything in, a coherent structure will never be shaped. Rather, what goes out is more important than what goes in. You cannot have a view of your reader that your reader knows nothing. This is also what happens sometimes with teachers. A teacher goes into the class and the student knows better than the teacher. But the teacher thinks, well, they don't know anything, so I'll start with the basics. You don't need to do those basics because they're supposed to know them. And the same goes for research. So, this much for outlining the state of affairs in which we operate and do our academic writing. Next is, what is the purpose of academic writing? Once again, we go back to that idea of language as a tool and language as an end, so means and end. Why do we do academic writing? Is it simply to gather information from here and there, put it together in some shape and then sell it to somebody? Earn a degree. Very strangely, it is called earning a degree. Imagine what a commercial transaction is indicated in the word earn. Academic writing being part of the language of knowledge, I believe, is the language that will make you think. It is not that will communicate primarily, no. Language for communication is for the basic transaction of life. You learn it as a child, you learn it in school, all right. The first question before a researcher is, what am I trying to discover? What have I discovered? Now, how to find a language adequate to communicate that to money? So first of all, the language is here an instrument of discovery. And that is the reason you see you have to struggle very hard with language. I'll come back to this at the end of today's brief. outline about academic writing as I understand it. You see, no research is worth anything if it doesn't have any innovative part in it. Something has to be innovative. Something has to be new. Even if it is a reinterpretation of the received data, it is an interpretation of interpretations, it has to be innovative. Now, if it is innovative, it needs a new language. You cannot do that unless you grapple with language right in its very intestine. Cannot take language. And you will see this. You will see this when you realize that actually in the course of writing do we discover what I think. So it's not like you have an idea and you write. This is a problem that all of us pass through. You're reading, you're thinking, you're taking notes, but you're not writing. Notes are not writing. It is only when you write that you discover what can be thought. That is the reason we say that writing is the final stage in which your ideas are processed. Otherwise, you are raw. You live raw and you die raw. What I will deliver is a dish uncooked, half-baked. And it can only make people sick. Okay? So after language is understood for its innovative purpose, then communication happens. And that is again a challenge. Who do you want to communicate? You cannot entirely write in such a way that everybody should understand. After all, you are a scholar, you are a specialist. You cannot write entirely as a scholar that only you should understand and your colleagues should understand and nobody else should understand. Now, this is the bridge that you have to go to and fro repeatedly. And try and find this like a balance where the scholarly can be communicated in a common language. It's nearly impossible, but it does happen. And I'll tell you how it happens. I'll give you some examples. Okay, so this takes us to the question of what we understand by language. Language is what we largely think in. Just try to think without language. Maybe Zen monks can do it. I am not a Zen monk, so I cannot say anything. But I believe that whenever I have to think, I need some kind of language. And we clearly admitted that before a child learns language, there is a kind of proto-language in the consciousness. So Laka is actually thinking in a wrong direction, according to what we do. You have to have certain systems of differences, of connections, of similarities within which your even basic demands, I need milk, I am thirsty, I am hungry, these will be met. They have to be articulated. Even as a language of science, it is a language. So, considering that language is what we largely think of, if not entirely, how can we think as thinkers if we don't think language? Because, now this is a paradox. We have to think language because ultimately it is language that thinks us. If you cannot think outside language, then language is thinking us. Unless therefore we think language, we cannot find that crack where language will yield itself to us and make us deal with it innovatively and find a phrasing of something. As a result, what will happen? What will happen is what I remember a teacher told this. A boy asked a question to a teacher years ago, and you see, the student told me this. And the question was, you see, Vangate Chuniya Farki, and my eminent colleague taught me in college. He said, Vanga Vanga Chuniya Chuniya Chuniya. मैं जो समझाना चाहता मैं लगता तो समझ गए हो के बारे में समझाना कितना तो समझ नहीं आता. This is research learning. This is a failure in fact. So, if you want to think, you need to think language. Otherwise, you will be thinking that language is your instrument, remain an instrument of language. See, it's not simply that language makes us. There is a point where we make language. But that point is not received ready yet. That is where we reach after a long journey. Well, this should guard us to the danger that language can impede thinking. You write because you don't want to think. You write in a kind of ready-made language. You have received it through the professional discourse of the discipline in which you are working. You are not able to think it. That is the reason we say read across disciplines, read across languages, read across periods of the history of a language. Because language can become a barrier, and if language becomes a barrier in thinking, it is because language becomes a substitute to thinking. We write, we speak, we believe, well, I'm thinking, I'm not thinking. I'm evading the challenge of thinking. And I have taken, therefore, the help of jargon. And I think I'm not. I picked up some words from here and there. They have entered a state of luminous khichdi in my head, and I believe, well, I have done something with. I have not. I've been fooled by deceptive language. Then, language can communicate, yes, but language can isolate also. That's the reason you need to have that bridge, where ultimately see the thinker, the researcher, the worker in the lab works in utter isolation. Even if he's working in a group, in a crowd, he's working in total isolation. And the danger is that isolation of the existential kind will become a linguistic isolation. He'll be speaking in a language that nobody understands. So if there is this danger, this easy temptation of writing so as to be understood, there is an equal danger of writing in a way that you believe you have understood it, but nobody else believes he has understood it, because nobody has understood it. Again, a difficult bridge is crossed, but it is there. If you have not seen it, the problem might be that we have not dealt with language at the level where you need to deal with it. Okay? Now, if you are able to resolve these contradictions, language as a mode of thinking, language for communication, language for innovation. If you're able to do this, then we can do something with which we have been cursed for centuries. The academy has been described as the ivory tower. Even though ivory is now, even for smugglers, very rare to find. We can then transform the ivory tower into a lighthouse. That is what it is. And remember, the lighthouse doesn't simply give light, it also gives warning of danger. It also stands on its ground against tempests. And this is the kind of state of affairs in which we are today. Even disengaged, unengaged intellectuals are actually at some level engaged whether they understand it. Because to remain away from all the sound and fury, as they say, of the academia of politics is itself a political act. This is what we need. So, what is to be done? Challenges are big, and 2 days, I believe, are too few. Except that you will have a window that will show to you how far you have to go and what kind of vista is there. You know, the American novelist, biographer, new journalist with NJ capitalized, wrote a book on writing, and he called that book a spooky art. Writing is a spooky art, and academic writing is an even spookier art. 3 reasons. that I can think of. One is academic writing has a natural tendency to fall into opacity. It will tend not to become understanding, and you have to find an extent. Two, there is a certain kind of danger in it. Three, language is witchcraft. Language is witchcraft. You are dealing with, performing with invisibles and making them take a concrete form in the mind of the reader. So it is a spooky. Now, I mentioned Norman Mailer. Norman Mailer is an exemplar for us because he is of that group that rewrote the rules of journalistic writing. If journalism can be written in a way, uh, if journalism can be written in a way that literature can give its the best of nourishment, so that is an indication. If journalism and literature come together, you have new journalism. Is there something new that way? If you look at it, it's not new. Marx doesn't write like a professor. Darwin does not. Among the models of good prose writing for us are Gandhi, Karl Marx, Nietzsche, Darwin, and I have listed quite a few. In fact, Van Gogh, Cezanne, Michelangelo, Socrates, and Plato. Because we don't know who is doing what. Is it Socrates or Plato? Russell, Chomsky, Camus. Think of any great mind that has shaped human history with ideas and look at their lives. They did not sacrifice the domain in which they were working, and yet they communicated. They communicated because they worked at that edge where the fire melts the borders between isolation and communication, between innovation and the given instrumentality of language. So, where does innovation happen? So if you go to Pushkin and Shakespeare, innovation best happens on the street. Listen to people, ordinary people talking, speaking, and you will understand how your scholarly discourse can take a few leaves out of their book. They teach us more about the flexibility that language demands than academic writing itself does. So your real workshop is on the street. That is where you go to from this workshop. An example is Richard Feynman, because he gave that famous formula. He said, if you want to know whether you have understood something you have discovered, try to explain it to a child of 5 or 6 or 7. If a child understands, then you succeed. And I remember Professor Ravind once, I asked him, I said, I want to understand the difference between wave and particle. And he explained it to me in 2 minutes. Something I would have studied in this. Now see, this is the possibility with us if we are engaged with literature and language, whichever is going to be fine. Because that is where you see in literature, language cultivates itself self-consciously and looks beyond the farthest edge of its possibility. As a result, innovation is happening right at the heart of the literary. That is what literature teaches all of us. Anyway, language obviously demands to be worked upon. Why? The simple reason is language is not an end. It's a means. Yes. But remember, if a means is to serve its purpose adequately, you must treat it like an end. If language is only treated as a means, then it will never become a good enough means for any one of us. It has to be an end. Only then it becomes a means for us. And then you have to say that, well, in writing, you can never say I'm right. I've been dealing with language. I was thinking the other day after they told me you have to come and speak. I thought I have been seriously dealing with language for about 42 years now. And now I am beginning to feel comfortable when I want to say it. But I tell you, when I'm writing, 80% of what I write happens on the page, not in the head. that is when you discover how you can meld the sentence and make it deliver in writing. And it does. So, and I don't feel in fact bad about it, because I remember what Aristotle said. He said your youth is after 60. Because the highest part of the human being is reason, and reason begins to finally clear after you're 60. I am yet to reach the threshold of my youth. The university and the government will think of it. So you retire people in their teenage. Well, and two final things. One is for the research scholar into academic writing, language is not learned through grammar but through pattern. Because rhetoric gives you the exposure to language as it is played, not the rule book of language. Look at the greatest dancers, the greatest footballers, the greatest tennis players. You might also know the rules, but you are not the greatest because you don't play it like an art. Rhetoric teaches you the art of writing and speaking. Grammar gives you the rules. So you begin with the rules and you go on with it. Then the unit for you is not the word but the sentence. So this is a misconception that if you know vocabulary and grammar, you are done. No, you are not done. You are undone actually. Because that is a stage you have to leave as soon as you leave college. That's if you leave school and you are done with it, fine. Now proceed further. People are talking about ChatGPT, and I just want to tell you that ChatGPT is an opportunity for you to decide that this is the kind of thing I need not do, and I will begin from here onwards. So it's not a threat to you and me if we know how to handle language. It is a threat to those who only think that language is an instrument. It's not just an instrument. For a researcher, it is not just an instrument. At least not that kind of instrument people believe it is. But Bhartrihari said two things. One is he said between the word and the meaning there is no necessary connection. And then he said between the word and the meaning there is a necessary connection. So how do you resolve the two? There is no necessary connection because now you have to establish a new connection and establish it in such a way that it becomes a necessary connection. The second thing he said, in a sentence, he says the sequence of words is unreal. Something that demands reflection. It only appears, actually it is not there. Which means, if you rearrange the sequence of words in a sentence, you might discover what you are actually looking for. What is hidden there? So these two things should go with us wherever we go. And at the end, I'll say that academic writing should not be considered as only a professional necessity. It is an existential opportunity. Very few people get to use language at that level and to that degree that academic writing demands of them. For most of us, life is spent in basic communication, writing emails and sending WhatsApp messages and talking. But if we are constituted in language, then we are never beyond bare infancy if we don't get into a serious encounter with language. So you have to push your limits and you have to realize that you will find your potential and more than your potential, which will even amaze you. With these, I thank you very much, and I am grateful that the Vice Chancellor from time to time is always an inspiration, and especially for ideas and language. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Rajesh, for the keynote address and for a beautiful and most auspicious beginning to this two-day workshop. I think he gave some very important tips, and his talk in itself was a lesson in how we can connect our words with our thoughts in an organic way. Professor Rajesh tried to dispel some common misconceptions about writing. I think it's very important for all of us who are involved in academic writing to understand that some conventions have now turned into orthodoxies. For instance, the needless insistence that one should keep oneself out of one's work, the anonymity of the writer, if I may put it like that. And we have to rethink the relationship of the person with language. Language cannot be reductively understood to be a tool. As Dr. Rajesh very rightly said, it is a means through which we process our ideas and attain a stage of self-realization. So it is a reciprocal process in which we work on language and language works on us. So once again, I thank Dr. Rajesh for accepting our invitation and delivering this beautiful lecture as the keynote address. Now it is my duty to say a word of welcome to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Arvind, who happens to be the chief guest in this inaugural session. Sir, we thank you for granting us permission to organize this workshop. And it gives me immense pleasure to inform the chief guest that we have more than 35 registrations for this two-day workshop, and scholars and faculty members from our university, from other universities such as Central University, Bathinda, Talwandi Sabo, and many other places have joined us today. So I would request Vardi Head, Department of Open and Distance Learning, to formally welcome the Vice Chancellor and present a bouquet to him. I would request Dr. Rajesh, Dean Languages, Professor Jindal Raj Sir, Professor Jaiswal, Professor Kumkum Miraj to please join. May I now request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Chief Guest for today's inaugural session, to deliver his presidential address.
Well, I don't really know exactly what I should say, but let me kind of mix two things, because you all have come to engage with the idea of writing, research writing or scientific writing or whatever one says. And of course, I walked in when Professor Rajesh was speaking, and I must first say that it's always a pleasure listening to him. And this is not something I'm saying because he happens to be here and I happen to be here. Because, see, at a given time, in a given community, actually, seed speaks, as I always call it, and let me begin from there. So I have been analyzing some things on my own, and I analyzed many things, but one person I think you would be knowing, so let me use that as an example of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan became very popular, and I think you all have heard him or heard his name. Now, I have been following Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan in a different way, and the following way. What was Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan when he was asked to sit when his father died? Then that seat was given to him, because the way musical traditions work is that when the, as we call it, cremation happened, they have to find the place in the Qawwali group. The person who has died, his place has to be found, and particularly if the head of the group has died, somebody has to be installed there. And that happens in some kind of a informal agreement of musicians. So people like Mathias and all very well-known people were there, and they decided to install him there, and he was very young. Anyway, that's a long story, let me not get into that. And then he started singing from that seat, and he sang, and he reached great heights, to the level that if you listen to Salamat Ali Khan talk about great musicians, and of course Salamat Ali Khan was the greatest musicians in my opinion of the 20th century, and his own opinion also. And he says that, well, you know, Ravi Shankar, me, and Nusrat, three are the great musicians. So he adds Nusrat to that list is a great compliment, because Salamat Ali Khan would not compliment so easily. He considers, and that's not the point. The point is, when he leaves that seat, his music changes and it deteriorates. So I think many times we do not realize that seat is not the physical space at which we sit. It is that seat of 300 years of Qawwali singing in which he was singing, and it was not just Nusrat, it was that entire tradition which was expressing itself through Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. That requires humility to realize that this is a seat and I am currently a representative of that seat. So I would say that Professor Rajesh is representing a seat, and currently he is one of the best representatives of that seat, where you talk about literature, philosophy and language in a way which is best suitable to that seat. That seat is maybe the traditions of this region, could be Punjabi University, could be better. So I want to compliment him on that. Second thing I wanted to mention was, let me actually not really give a lecture since it's a workshop. So there is a very well-known physicist. I know, since the communities are so divided, when you talk about research writing, I can assume that there will not be any scientist here, right? Whereas workshop should have actually attracted PhD students and young people who are doing science, because they have to write science and they have to do a lot of research writing here. But maybe they will attend some other workshop, and that's very unfortunate. Should not happen like that. Anyway, there is a very well-known Indian physicist by the name of Anupam Garg. Anupam Garg, I think, has a Patiala connection, also is from Moga. He did very well, so much well that there's a Nobel laureate by the name of Tony Leggett, and there are Garg-Leggett inequalities, which are very, it's a well-known paper, and those inequalities are named after a Nobel laureate and Anupam Garg. So Anupam Garg is a very well-known, very well-decorated physicist. Now Anupam Garg went from India, I think he did his MSc in IIT Delhi, BSc in Patiala or Moga, and he worked with a great man by the name of David Mermin. David Mermin, if you see his writing, he used to write frames of reference in physics today for popular sense, and his writing has certain quality. Now Anupam Garg went, and he was a very smart physics student, and they were working on theoretical problems. So they did something, some good piece of research they did. So Anupam Garg were asked to write a draft. He wrote a draft, he gave it to David. David Mermin gave some feedback and returned the draft to Anupam Garg. It went back and forth. It went back and forth for about a year. One day Anupam Garg said, I want to talk to you. He said, yeah, come on. All the work is done, results are there. The world of physics should know what we have done, all the calculations they have done. Why are we not finalizing a draft and publishing it? Why are you quibbling over writing and presenting this? He said, young man, any damn fool can do calculations. Important is, how are we going to tell these results to the community? That tells you the importance of expression, because at the end of the day, you're going to tell what you have done, the findings of your research to someone, to an audience, and you will not be there to explain your point of view. You will not be there to, your text should speak for itself. And also in a way that it not only communicates the content, it also communicates the subtleties, and it also should communicate the insights that you have gained, and that is not easy. So this whole idea that currently which is going on in the domain of research, science research as well as social science research, that you do some survey, get some data, plot some graphs, put them into your manuscript, write some introduction, and just say a little bit about you found this and you found that, and it becomes a research article, is a misconception. And if you are a young researcher wanting to get into research writing, don't do it. Because once you get into this habit of what they call smallest publishable modules, I think your research creativity is already gone. Don't get it. And this is the American model of academics that has brought this in, that keep publishing something good or bad or rubbish, and then you say, oh, I have now 500 articles published, I have now 20 books published. So it's more important to, as I always say in research, this now has become my favorite example to give, that if you are making bread, you make 10% bad bread, it's not so good, still you can eat and get nutrition. रोटी थोड़ी सड़ भी जाएगी, कोई गल नहीं, खा लेंगे, भूख तो मिटेगी. But if you are trying to produce knowledge and that is substandard, it is completely useless. It has no use. 90% correct knowledge doesn't have 90% use, it has 0% use. So quality in your work and expression should be extremely important, and that's what one should focus on. It needs to be learned. So first step towards learning something is that one should know that I don't know, and I need to learn how to go about, and this is a process. I mean, I remember when I was writing my thesis, and I was writing and my supervisors was correcting. In that entire document, only in one place he put a line and wrote well written. And I have kept that sheet in his hand where he said well written. Because everywhere else he was, saying various things, but there is at least one sheet which he found well written, and that is a compliment I keep with me, that at least something he found had written that. So what I mean to say is it takes time, and it takes you have to become an apprentice with someone who kind of talks to you and gives you feedback, and that's how you do it. But the first step is humility, that you must realize that the data, the graphs, and all those things are there, but there is something. See, I'm talking at a somewhat more mundane level. Professor Rajesh had already brought in a lot of philosophical issues related with expression, language, writing, all that, and so on. And those are extremely important because you have to finally move in that direction. Last thing I want to say is that this tension between what you have done, what is on your mind, what you want to say, how it comes out, what it means to you, what it means to the reader. It's a multi-cornered tension. And that's very important because in the process of resolving this tension only, creative work happens. And tension doesn't get resolved. Maybe you create a new dimension of the tension, but you gain insights about this tension. And that's extremely important. And the poetic expression, I would say, shows you that how this tension is there and how this tension requires sometimes enigmatic expression. Because precise expression has its own, like you have to want to be very precise. Everything should have a very unique meaning. But then you realize that this also could be a trap. So finally, it is the poetic expression which many times brings out this tension and its multipolarity in such a way that it also becomes beautiful. So my favorite quote is from Mirza Ghalib, where he says that, "Kaise tasveer ke parde mein bhi uriyan nikla." Kaise tasveer ke parde mein bhi uriyan nikla. This is a poem in itself, and it has deeper meaning, which I will not get into. Basic idea is that you cannot, if you put dust on something which is naked and true, it will still look as naked as stark truth will look like stark truth only. Whatever you clothe it, you cover it, you put. But now you will ask the question: what will Ghalib say to complete this couplet, complete this share? What does he say? Now that's where you see in poetry you can do it. So you can apply your mind. What would be next line? So next line he says is कि शौक har rang rakibe saro saman. You can't imagine that he will now close it in this way. So this kind of multipolarity coming in two lines can only be done in poetic expression. And that's why at the end of the day, whatever may happen, poetry always has its appeal, whatever may be your expression. But my point is that you might be a social scientist or a natural scientist engaging with writing. If you keep wondering about the multipolarity which is expressed best in poetic writing, indirectly it helps you express yourself in other domains also. So these engagements with the various things should be kept in mind. Well, I will also end with another couplet from Paz, which I had said the other day in the Senate hall. मताए लौहो कलम छिन गई तो क्या गम है कि खून दिल में डुबोली हैं उंगलियां मैंने. This is also about writing. जुबान पे मोहर लगी तो क्या कि रख दी है हर एक हल्का है जंजीर में जुबान में. So ये जी हल्का है जंजीर च जुबान रखनी है, ये काम है करना बड़ा औखा काम है. वो जुबान रखने का काम ही है, लिखण लिखाउण का काम ही है. तो कितने कितने तुसी वो जुबान रख देनी है ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੜਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਕੋਲ ਪਹੁੰਚਦੀ ਹੈ. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸ਼ਬਦਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਮੈਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਡਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਵਿਭਾਗ ਦਾ. ਹੁਣ ਅਸੀਂ ODL ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਓਪਨ ਐਂਡ ਡਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਲਰਨਿੰਗ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਹਿਫਿਲ ਸਜਾਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੰਮ ਚੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਮਾਂ ਕੱਢ ਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਾਰਤਾਲਾਪ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਮੌਕਾ ਹੈ.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very apt response to the keynote address. There was a little doubt in the morning when we learned that VC sir has 3 programs lined up. So there was a question in the air whether he'll come or not. But in our hearts, we were sure we'll definitely take our time. Sir, we thank you once again for being a part of this. Thank you everyone for being a part of it. Yes, one very important formality, I beg your pardon. I would request Professor Rajinder Pal Prat, Dean Languages, Punjabi University, Patiala, to propose a vote of thanks.
ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਵਾਈਸ ਚਾਂਸਲਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਰੁਝੇਵੇਂ ਭਰੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਸਮਾਂ ਕੱਢਿਆ ਆਏ. ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਫਾਰਮੈਲਿਟੀ ਲਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਗੇ, ਉਹ ਜਿਸ ਵੀ ਵਿਸ਼ੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਕੋਈ ਸੈਮੀਨਾਰ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਹੋਵੇ ਉਸ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕੁਝ ਨਵੀਆਂ ਕੁਝ ਮੌਲਿਕ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਧਾਰਨਾਵਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ. ਸਹੀ ਮਾਇਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਕੈਡਮਿਕ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਆ ਉਹ ਇਹੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਨਵੀਆਂ ਇਨਸਾਈਟਸ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ. ਉਹਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ, ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ. ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਰਜੇਸ਼ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਣਨਾ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ. ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਕਲੀਗ ਹੋਣ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਹੋਣ, ਟੀਚਰ ਹੋਣ. ਨਿਸ਼ਚੇ ਹੀ ਉਹ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਪੈਸ਼ਨ ਨਾਲ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ, ਦਿਲ ਨਾਲ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਣਨਾ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ. ਤਾਂ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਸ ਮਸਲੇ ਤੇ ਕਿ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਵਿਸ਼ਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਲਿਖਣਾ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਸੱਚ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਦਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਰੋਲ ਹੈਗਾ. ਬੜਾ ਡੈਲੀਗੇਟ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਸੀਗਾ, ਬਹੁਤ ਅੱਛੇ ਢੰਗ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਮਝਾਇਆ, ਬੜਾ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਿਆ. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ, ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ. ਔਰ ਇਸ ਡਿਪਾਰਟਮੈਂਟ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ. ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਡੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ. ਇਸ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਤਨਾਮ ਸਿੰਘ ਸੰਧੂ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਟੀਮ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ, ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਅਜੇ ਵਰਮਾ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਰਮਜੀਤ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਆਏ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ. ਬਹੁਤ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਣਾ. ਜਦੋਂ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕੁਝ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੜੀ ਅਜੀਬ ਜਿਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕੁਝ ਦਿਨ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਿਤੇ ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਣ ਦਾ ਮੌਕਾ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਤੇ ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਨੋਟ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਦੇਣਾ ਸੀ. ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਵੀਰ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇੰਟਰੈਕਟਿਵ ਸੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਬਣਾਉਣੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਪੁੱਛ ਲਵਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਵਰਕਸ਼ਾਪ ਕਿਉਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਮੈਥੋਡੋਲੋਜੀ ਤੇ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪੇਪਰ ਦੇ ਲਿਖਣ ਲਈ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਇਹਦੀ ਕੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ. ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਵਾਬ ਮਿਲਿਆ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੋਲ ਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੱਸਣਾ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਿਖ ਕੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੇ ਦਿਓ, ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਮਿਲੇ ਉਹ ਜਵਾਬ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰਮੋਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲੇਗੀ। ਦੂਸਰਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਇਹ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਰਹਿਣਾ, ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਇੰਸਟੀਚਿਊਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਕੀਤਾ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਨੰਬਰ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ। ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਟੀਚਰ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗ੍ਰੇਸ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ, ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਕਿਤੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪੇਪਰ ਛਪਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਾਂ ਮੇਰੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਛਪੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਕਲੈਕਟ ਕਰ ਲਈ ਤੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਐਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਸੁਣੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਇਸ ਲਈ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਸੱਚ ਦੀ ਖੋਜ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਰਿਸਰਚ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਸੌਖਾ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਕੀ ਅਜਿਹਾ ਕੁਝ ਵੀ ਹੈ? ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਰਿਸਰਚ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਿਤਾਬਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੇਲੇ ਇਹ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਸੀ। ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਟੀਟਿਊਡ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਬਦਲਣ ਲਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਉਹ ਦਿਲ ਨੂੰ ਛੂਹਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਛੂਹਦੀ, ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਵਰਕ ਵੀ ਉਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਦਿਲ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਛੋਹ ਰਹੀ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਢੰਗ ਨਾਲ ਵਰਕ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ। ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪੇਪਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਫਿਰ ਹੋਰ ਢੰਗ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ। ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਦੇ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਦਰ ਡਿਸਪਲਿਨ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਆ। ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਰਜੇਸ਼ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਬੜਾ ਫਿਲਾਸਫਿਕਲੀ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਉਠਾਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਮਝ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕੋਈ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਕਿਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਪੋਸ਼ਾਕ ਪਹਿਨਾਉਣੀ ਆ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਕਲੋਥਿੰਗ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ। ਅਸਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਤੇ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਬਹੁਤਾ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ। ਇਨਫੈਕਟ ਇਹ ਦੋਨੇ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਕਿ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਹੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਹੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਸੋਚਣਾ। ਇਹ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਅਕਸਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਰਤ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ, ਪਰ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪੇਪਰ ਦੇ ਲਿਖਣ ਦੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਜਾਂ ਅਕੈਡਮਿਕ ਰਾਈਟਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਇਹ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਬੜਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈਗਾ। ਨਿਸ਼ਚੇ ਹੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਅੱਜ ਇਨਸਾਈਟਸ ਮਿਲੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਖੁਦ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪੇਪਰ ਲਿਖੋਗੇ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ ਦੇ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਪੇਪਰ ਦੇਖੋਗੇ ਵੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਇਸ ਵੱਲ ਧਿਆਨ ਦਿਆ ਜਾਓ। ਨਹੀਂ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰੀ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਚੁਟਕਲੇ ਹੋਣ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਟੀਚਰ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਵਰਕ ਦੇਖਦਾ ਤੇ ਕਮੈਂਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਹ ਮੌਲਿਕ ਵੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਹ ਓਰੀਜਨਲ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਹ ਕਿਤੇ ਇਹਦੀ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਨਕਲ ਵੀ ਮਾਰੀ ਵੀ ਆ। ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਰਟੀਕਲ ਆ ਚੰਗਾ ਵੀ ਆ, ਗੁੱਡ ਵੀ ਆ, ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਮਾੜਾ ਵੀ ਆ। ਪਰ ਮਾੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁੱਡ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਨਕਲ ਆ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਓਰੀਜਨਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਹੀ ਗਲਤ ਹੈਗਾ। ਤਾਂ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਚਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤਨੋਂ ਮਨੋਂ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਈਏ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰਗਟ ਕਰ ਸਕੀਏ, ਜਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਉਹ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਵਰਤਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ 5 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝਾ ਸਕੀਏ। ਸੱਚਮੁੱਚ ਜੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਟਾਰਗੇਟ 5 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਬੱਚਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਅਸਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਟੋਟਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਉਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਵੇਂ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਦਾ ਜੰਜਾਲ ਖੜਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਵੱਲ ਜਿਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਧਿਆਨ ਦਿਵਾਇਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫੇਰ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ, ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ, ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ, ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।
We'll disperse for tea now and meet in the technical session after the tea. Thank you.
Thank you.